Senator Elizabeth Warren, meanwhile, admitting yesterday government spending is adding to inflation. Watch.
You know, it's very easy to sit around and say, gee, I want all the benefits from this spending, but I want to pretend that somehow we could have gotten them for free. There is no free lunch in this world.
A light bulb has gone off. That did not stop the Senate from passing $1.5 trillion in spending last night, which includes aid for Ukraine and billions of dollars in earmarks. Joining me right now is Indiana Senator Mike Braun. He's a member of the Budget, Appropriations, and Agricultural Committees. Senator, it's good to see you. Thanks very much for being here. Walk us through this $1.5 trillion plan that the Senate passed last night.
So, Maria, first of all, this should have been for September 30th of last year. So we were that tardy in terms of getting this spending bill across the line. 1.5 trillion in a total of about 5 trillion. The other 3.5, they've come up with a gimmick of mandatory spending. We can't even touch it. Doesn't make much difference because I'm on the budget committee, Maria. We do no budgets anymore. The biggest business in the world, it gets dropped in our lap, 2,700 pages, 367 pages of earmarks, which we haven't had for 11 years. And I had an amendment to say strike them. The place is so out of control. I fear for our kids and our kids' kids because of all the debt, because all this spending, it's now up to about 30% of it we're borrowing. You know, we don't, take the tough decisions, the budgeting, raise revenues. Nobody wants to do that. That's generally what you do in any other government. You can't borrow to consume. It's a real mess, Maria, right. And last night was an example of it.
Well, I was surprised to hear Elizabeth Warren finally get that light bulb to understand that the more spending we do, the worse inflation will get. But let me get your take on defense spending, because I've been railing for a couple of months here that Joe Biden is basically cutting defense spending by not increasing it. When you compare it to inflation, it's a cut. But it looks like you have agreed to increase defense spending. Am I reading that right?
Well, number one, there were just a few people in on the whole spending package. It would have been your leaders and your head appropriators. I'm an appropriator as well, didn't know anything about what was in it. So it's a little deceiving, Maria, in that defense now more than ever should be enabled and probably upped. But it's part of the unholy alliance in this place where each side rolls over for the other, in spending domestically and on defense are up 7-8%. Record levels of increases on top of everything that we did. Yes, I think defense is the most important thing that we do here. I don't hold it sacrosanct in that it should be subject to budgeting, audits, and the things they don't want to do. We waste money here across the board, but now more than ever, there should be a little more emphasis on defense versus domestic spending.
Well, you would think so. Our adversaries are increasing their spending, and our adversaries are getting more aggressive. And President Biden is talking to them about increasing their oil pumping. I mean, why is he going to places like Venezuela, Iran, Saudi Arabia? Instead of ramping up production here in the U.S., we know what he's been saying for the last year, and the Democrats have been saying for several years, but they're trying to backpedal out of it now. The European Union foreign policy chief said that the Iran nuclear talks are currently paused. That moved oil, I think. Your thoughts on what we're seeing in terms of the president going hat in hand to these dictators across the world to get them to pump up their oil production rather than talking to American producers?
So this is fairly simple. You got to go back to the campaigns of the Democrats, and you've got Biden going over and saying, we're going to put the fossil fuel business out of business. And in any business, we are the biggest oil producer in the world, ahead of Saudi Arabia by almost double, and more than double Russia, who's third. And many places have reserve capacity to pump. And most of the places he's begging now have that, where we could have been in that catbird seat until he shut it down in terms of marginally new production. That explains it in a nutshell of why he has to do that, and it's based upon what they have purposely done in terms of a self-inflicted wound to take our energy independence and get rid of it.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. How should we be dealing with China in all of this? Because one of your colleagues, Tom Cotton, the other night said, look, everything we're doing for Ukraine, we need to be doing for Taiwan, because Xi Jinping is watching this closely. I was struck by the headline yesterday, which, of course, moved Chinese stocks. Chinese stocks trading in the U.S. plunged after the Securities and Exchange Commission raised concerns about those companies failing to adhere to accounting rules. Tom Cotton on Fox last night stressed the need for the U.S. to break away from the Chinese economy. Here's what he said on Fox. I want to get your take on this, Senator. Watch this.
It is vital that we decouple strategically from the Chinese economy. Everything we're doing to break away from the Russian economy, to put a distance between our economy and theirs, to get our companies out of Russia, we should be doing in China again right now. We should be doing these in a careful and deliberate fashion, so we are never in the position with China and Taiwan that some countries in Europe found themselves with Russia and Ukraine, and that we don't empower and embolden the Chinese communists to go for the jugular in Taiwan because they think they have America over the economic barrel.
Senator, what do you think? What's the solution here?
Couldn't agree with Tom more. They're playing chess, and Xi is the one moving it around on the board. Russia, to them, is probably a source of fuel in the future, and the commonality is authoritarian governments. And you can see what China's been doing, as they've been stealing our intellectual property, manipulating markets. We've gotten lured through big corporations to tap into their consumer market, moving a lot of our supply chain there. Got to be careful. They are in it for the long run, and when they decide to pivot, it'll be painful for us if we don't withdraw gradually. I know in the business that I ran for 37 years, that dependency on China, if you've got it, is a rough thing to have. We were lucky that we never had that much involvement there. But everybody is looking to move a supply chain out of a place that you can't trust with a handshake. You can now see Putin, Xi, any of these places where you're dependent, lessen that dependency over time, or you're going to pay the price if you don't.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. It certainly, I know it doesn't happen overnight, but we got to start actually moving on these comments so that we're not reliant on China to make our prescription drugs, for example. Senator, we're back up against the wall. It's great to get your take on all of this, Senator. Thanks for your leadership. Really appreciate your time this morning. Senator Mike Braun joining us this morning at the Capitol. We'll be right back.